Beneath me here is the crater that was left by the direct hit that the Iranian missile made. It had a 200-meter blast range, so you can see the buildings, one brought down there, there's a kindergarten over there. These apartment buildings here strip bare the facades by the force of the impact. Over here, you'll see another building that's been brought down, essentially. This is major devastation near the nuclear facility of Dimona. That is why this area is being targeted, but it's civilians who are bearing the brunt of this. A number of casualties, huge damage, and a major physical, visible reminder of what the Iranian threat still means to the Israeli people.
All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving our praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I like to give double honors unto the apostles and the artists of great millstone who I learned this truth from. And I like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And it is Tuesday, but this is going to be another episode of Missile Monday. And I have this article from the BBC, and it says Iranian missiles injured 180 in towns near Israeli nuclear site. So I'm just going to go into this article and bring out a few scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point. And today is also, Tuesday, March 22nd, 2026. So it says Israel's health ministry says 180 people were injured, some seriously, in Iranian missile strikes on two southern Israeli towns close to a nuclear facility. The ministry says 116 people were injured in Arad and another 64 in Dimona. Excuse me, Slakia. After ballistic missiles hit the towns on Saturday evening. The International Atomic Energy Agency, or the IAEA, says it is not aware of any damage to the nuclear research facility located about 13 kilometers, 8 miles outside of Dimona. Iranian state TV earlier said the strikes were in response to an attack on Iran's Natanz nuclear facility on Saturday. On Sunday, at least 7 people were injured in an Iranian missile attack on Tel Aviv, emergency services say. The Israeli Air Force says Tehran has fired 400 missiles at Israel since the U.S.-Israeli attack on Iran on February 28th. Of these, 92% were intercepted, it adds. In Iraq, local residents said the blasts they heard on Saturday were terrifying. The missile badly damaged several buildings, leaving a deep crater, and that's what they do. Of course, it's terrifying. You're hearing explosions, and then again, it says they leave craters, man. So these are non-nuclear missiles, but still. Continuing, it says Naram Zaid, a paramedic in the town, told BBC News she had seen a lot of children with head and chest injuries after being crushed by objects inside a damaged building. And, among those that are suffering the most from these missiles being flown back and forth are children, because a lot of children are being seriously injured or being put to death. Now, they are heathens, so, we don't really care. But just to point that out, a lot of children are suffering from this war as well. It says, I was trying to reassure a 10-year-old girl with head injuries with blood on her face from broken glass, she added. She was refusing to get in the ambulance as her parents were still inside the building. And we waited for her parents to be evacuated from the destroyed apartment block, and then we sent them all to the hospital. The outside walls of 2 residential apartment buildings were gouged out by the impact. Crowds of dark, suited men stood staring at the damage in this ultra-Orthodox town in the Negev desert. The nearby town of Dimona experienced a similar missile attack, like a similar missile strike. Among the many injured, there was a 10-year-old boy. Medics described his condition as serious. In both Dimona and Arad, interceptors were launched that failed to hit the threats, resulting in 2 direct hits by ballistic missiles with warheads weighing hundreds of kilograms, Israeli firefighters said. Ahmadil bin Yehuda, which again, that's how you know they're not the people, you know. It says lives a 2-minute walk from the street where the missile hit in Dimona. It says he was on the steps to the bomb shelter when it struck. There is damage to all the houses in our community. Many collapsed ceilings and windows blown in, including in my own house. Ben Yehuda, which in the Hebrew is Ban Yehuda, which, you know, Ban is son, Yehuda is Judah. It says he went to visit the street where the missile landed, and the entire area is just devastated, including a kindergarten. He knows several people whose apartments were completely destroyed. I felt horror. I just can't believe the power of what a missile can do to concrete. To see the devastation is hard to comprehend, and of course it's horrible. You know, of course it's terrifying, you know. And again, those are non-nuclear missiles. Now, just imagine what these nuclear missiles are going to do. They're going to do way more damage than what is happening over there in the East, in Israel, Iran, and Gaza. It's going to be way worse than that. It says both Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Isaac Herzog visited the impacted sites on Sunday. Now, again, it's still speculation that, you know, Bibi Milkowski is, you know, it's speculation on whether he's alive or not, you know, because there's been AI videos coming out where you can clearly see it's fake, you know, so we don't know what's going on with that guy right now, you know, but either way it goes, is real over there, you know. It says the ability of Iran to keep inflicting this kind of damage inside Israel is a reminder of the human cost of the war. Urgent investigations are taking place to ascertain how the missiles breached Israel's air defense systems, and it doesn't matter how, you know, well equipped or up to date, you know, your defense system is not going to, you know, intercept every missile, just like, you know, the U.S., you know, what number 47 wants to do, you know, with the Golden Dome, you know, which is, you know, just a missile defense system, which is ultimately going to fail because it's not going to be able to stop any of those missiles that get launched toward America, you know. But again, it's not happening yet, but it is going to happen, you know. So, continuing, it says, but as in the 12-day war last summer, Israelis know that the system is not infallible. As then, such attacks are more likely to harden the public's resolve rather than weaken it. So, there's a couple more, you know, I'll just finish it out. It says, the Shimon Peres Negev Nuclear Research Center, located in the Negev Desert, is often referred to as a colloquially as the Dimona reactor. It is long accepted as holding Israel's undeclared arsenal of nuclear weapons. Officially, the site is said to focus solely on research, but for about 6 decades, it has been an open secret that Israel developed a nuclear bomb there. Even if each even if each succeeding government has maintained a position of ambiguity over this, it has meant that Israel is the only nuclear power in the Middle East. So any indication that it is being targeted is taken with utmost gravity by Israel. And again, I won't say the only, nuclear armed nation, because again, you still have India and Pakistan. They possess nuclear weapons as well, So Israel isn't the only nation. They're just one of the nations over in the East that possess nuclear weapons. So to finish off this article, it says both Israel and the U.S. have set the elimination of any possible Iranian capacity to develop a nuclear bomb as the key aim of the war. Iran's own Atomic Energy Organization described the attack on Natanz as a violation of the Treaty on the Non-Proliferation of Nuclear Weapons. Though it said no leakage of radioactive materials was reported and there was no damage to residents of the surrounding areas. Natanz was also targeted in the first days of the war, which started on February 28th by U.S.-Israeli strikes, as well as during the 12-day war last June. Asked about Natanz on Saturday, the Israel Defense Forces told Israeli and international media that they were not aware of a strike in the area. So, as you can see, tensions are still heating up in the East, between, the U.S. and Israel and Iran, man. So we're just getting that much closer to World War III, And as always, we have to make mention that, this Third World War isn't going to take place until the prophecy of Revelation, the 13th chapter, verse 16 on down, where it speaks of the mark of the beast, which the mark of the beast is the RFID microchip, excuse me, Slakia. And until that prophecy comes to pass, this war will not fully take place. But again, we can still see that tensions are heating up, man. And with this war that's going on, it's still affecting, the American economy alone, because if they can't get, those ships through, the Strait of Hormuz, then what, man, that's thus causing gas prices to increase. Because again, that's one thing I've been, keeping an eye on, since this war started, were the gas prices, man. I've seen gas shoot up, regular gas here in Michigan, depending on where you go. The cheapest I've seen is $3.79. The highest I've seen was, $3.99. A couple places in the city may have, in Detroit, may have had, over $4. I know one gas station in particular, regular gas was over $4. Premium, depending on where you go, could be anywhere from $4.79 to over $5. So again, man, the cost of fuel is increasing, because of this war. And it's just going to lead to the absolute collapse of this society, But I'm just going to hit a couple main points. Didn't want to make this one too long, but it's still good to see that, these things are happening, man. World War III is on the way. So I actually started with that. You know, it's the book of Revelation, chapter 11 and verse 14. And it says, the second woe is past, and behold, the third woe cometh quickly. And indeed, the second woe, really, the first woe, World War One, came to pass. Then World War Two, came to pass. And now what? We're on the verge of a third world war, you know, and we can see it is coming quickly, you know, because again, tensions are heating up in the east, and it's all because of who? Primarily Amalek, you know. So let's get that in Jeremiah 49. And verse 20. Just as Jeremiah chapter 49 and verse 20, it says, therefore, hear the counsel of the Lord. They have taken against Edom, and his purposes they hath purposed against the inhabitants of Teman. Surely the least of the flock shall draw them out. Surely he shall make their habitations desolate with them and right. Amalek is, going to eventually draw out, these different nations, primarily Russia, and America, because these are the main two nations, the primary two world powers that are going to be directly at war with each other, because it's prophesied that Russia, aka the bear, is going to take down America, aka the whore. Russia's going to take down America and during this third world war, and that's just on a small scale. But as we know or should know, on a much larger scale, our Lord Yahweh Shai, along with the angels, are going to finish this place off, man, and take all of the other nations down, along with this place. But that's what's going to happen, man, and that's what is happening. Amalek is causing these nations, to get involved, because right now, Iran is allies with Russia, and it's, been speculation, it had news has come out, but again, just speculation that, Russia, has been sending, info to Iran or, and vice versa. I forget, because it was a little while, probably about a week or two ago, but either way it goes, man, Russia is going to have Iran's back, because that's one of, the allies that is spoken of in Ezekiel 38, which I'll grab it real quick. It's the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38, verse 1. And it says, and the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and write Gog. It's talking about Russia. Magog just simply means from Gog, and the word Russia is actually a Hebrew word, which that's what it means, the chief prince. Ra'ash, meaning head or chief. Shar, meaning prince. So what? Russia, Ra'ash Shar, the chief prince. Verse 3, it says, and say, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn thee back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all thine army, horses and horsemen, all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, right? So again, the Lord is putting that old USSR spirit back on Russia, that warlike spirit, Verse 5, Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, and all of them with shield and helmet. And the first nation that it mentioned is Persia, who is modern day Persia, Iran, because they changed their name. I forget the exact year, but it was either 1935 or 1938. It was one of those years, where Iran changed, or where Persia changed its name to Iran. One of those years, 1935 or 1938. I have to go back and look. But again, that's one of Russia's allies. That's the first, nation that it mentions, Persia, then Ethiopia and Libya, then it lists the other nations. But that's really the main point I want to get, is that, Iran is allies with Russia, Verse 6, it says, Gomer and all his bands, and the house of Tagarma of the north quarters, and all his bands, and many people with thee, says, Be thou prepared, and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. And right, man, Russia is going to be a guard unto all of those different, Eastern nations, all of the different Arab nations, Ethiopia, Libya, a few different Hamite nations. And it mentions Persia, which is Iran, is going to protect those nations during World War III, So America in reality is outnumbered, because again, even America's allies are going to turn on her, because as I've made mention before, you had countries like Japan, a couple years ago, I want to say in 2024, where they pretty much questioned if the U.S. would have their back, if war would ever happen, So what? They wanted to develop their own nuclear missiles, which they can. They have the capability to do so, right? And then what? Last year, you had, Germany ask the U.S. for, help nuclear-wise, but what? President Trump, pretty much ignored Germany. So what do? Germany sought help from either France or the UK, nuclear help. And then you also have, this year, the UK, as of, I think it was last week I did the video, now the UK wants to step away from America and develop their own missiles, because again, they're questioning if America is going to have their back, so it's not looking good for this place. And they can, fabricate all of the numbers that they want, but, they're not doing good over there, So real quick, let's get the book of Matthew, chapter 24, and verse 6, and it says, And you shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for all these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. And right, we're still hearing of wars and rumors of wars. And again, as I make mention, even though you don't hear about it as much, Russia is still at war with Ukraine. China is at war with Taiwan, India against Pakistan, excuse me, Slovakia, and right now, when you have the U.S. and the Israelis against Iran, these are wars and rumors of wars, and again, World War III. It's on the way, man. We're seeing these things take place, and this is how we know that our Lord Yahweh Shai is that much closer to returning, So real quick, I mentioned it, so I'll actually grab it. The book of Revelation, chapter 17 and verse 16, it says, And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. And right, and this is going into, America's allies turning on her, because again, those different, EU and NATO nations, that possess nuclear weapons, they're going to aid in that destruction. They're going to help, Russia and its allies help take Babylon down, So let's grab a couple more and that'll be it. But let's get the book of Malachi, chapter 4, in verse 1, and it says, "For behold, the day cometh that shall burn as an oven, and all the proud, yea, and all that do wickedly shall be stubble. And the day that cometh shall burn them up, saith the Lord of hosts, that it shall leave them neither root nor branch." And right, what is that day that is coming that's going to burn as an oven? World War III. And why? Because it's going to be fought with these nuclear weapons. And to back that up, it's the book of Isaiah, chapter 9, and verse 5. And it says, "For every battle of the warrior is with confused noise, and garments rolled in blood. But this shall be with burning and fuel of fire." And right, man, this coming world war isn't going to be how traditional warfare was fought. We will have, one nation of men on one side of the battlefield, coming up against another nation of men on the other side of the battlefield and charging each other, in the center. That traditional warfare, guerrilla warfare, hand-to-hand combat, men having different weapons of war, swords, spears, shields, bow and arrows, things of that sort. That confused noise hearing, swords hitting other swords, men being cut, hit with arrows, different things, man. But what? It says this is going to be the burning and fuel of fire. And just like I always make mention, you will have ground troops that are going to be going to war with each other. But this Third World War is primarily going to be fought with these nuclear missiles, Then I'm going to end it with this. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 9, and verse 15. And it says, "And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour, and a day, and a month, and a year, for the slated third part of men." And right, when you read in Revelation, the 7th chapter, it mentions the 4 angels, which these are 4 literal angels holding back the 4 winds, which the 4 winds represents the coming destruction that is going to take place on the planet Earth, i.e., World War III, And there is a set time when it is going to take place. Just like it says, there's a particular hour, day, month, and year, when this destruction is going to take place. So once the prophecy of the mark of the beast, comes to pass, and the majority of people in the world receive the mark of the beast, save the elect, then that's when things are going to speed up and eventually this war is going to take place. And just like it says, is to slay the third part of men, because you have 3 classes of men on the earth today. You have the sons of God, which today are known as the biblical Israelites, so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, the tribe of Judah, all the way down to the tribe of Issachar. You have the sons of men, which are the different heathen nations. And then you have the sons of the wicked, which is the nation of Edom, you so-called white people, and you are the third part of men. This destruction that is coming upon the planet Earth is for you, and then you will have 2/3 of the nation of Israel that are going to get caught up in this destruction, for their wickedness, primarily because they received the mark of the beast. And then you different heathen nations, you're just collateral damage. You don't matter. So you can get the mark of the beast, you cannot get it, Just know if you make it up until that point to where nukes start flying, then, you're just going to die with the wicked, which is the nation of Edom, and the wicked Israelites, man, So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till the next time I say, Shalom.